Tell Judge Williams what you shot your father with.
A 9mm semi-automatic rifle.
And tell Judge Williams where on his body you shot your father.
In the back of the head.
And tell Judge Williams how long you looked at the back of your father's head through the scope before you pulled the trigger.
I'm not sure.
Do you recall telling a friend that you aimed the gun at your father's head about 5 minutes, thinking about how easy it would be to kill him before you pulled the trigger?
I do not recall that conversation. I was pretty drunk that night, and the events afterwards, I was in an emotional disarray, and I'm not exactly sure what I said to, was it Johnny Hale or William Ross?
Yes.
That night was kind of blurry afterwards.
Tell Judge Williams what you shot your mother with.
The same weapon.
All right. And didn't you stand over her and reload the weapon with a clip before you shot her?
In 2002, then 16-year-old Boy Scout Blake Walker killed both his father and his mother inside of their home and then ran away to Mexico. After quickly being caught, he was sentenced to 25 years to life. That means a life sentence without the possibility of parole until after serving 25 years. Recently, the governor decided to grant a commutation for Blake Walker, and he was released after serving just 15 years on the 25-year sentence. And he was now is trying to take another bite at the apple and is asking to have this entire course of events expunged from his record. Yes, you heard that right. That means that it would no longer appear anywhere on his record. And we are right now going to listen to the hearing to see if they will make a recommendation to the governor to expunge his record. I want to make a special thank you to Miss Rose for bringing me this case.
Mr. April, you can call your first witness, please.
I would call Blake Walker.
Blake Walker, will you raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
So help me God, I do.
Okay. You may lower your hand and answer Mr. April's questions.
Please state your full name.
Blake Peterson Walker.
And where do you reside now?
Louisville, Kentucky, 02.
Are you presently employed?
Yes.
What are the jobs you have?
I work as an HVAC technician's helper for Prudential Heating and Air in Louisville. And on my off days, I help Rick Elper's framing construction company frame houses. And I'm also training dogs on the side, nights and weekends sometimes.
Is that volunteer work, the last one?
No, I get paid for it.
How long did you serve in prison?
17 years.
Can you briefly explain to the court why you want this expungement of your criminal record and the vacation of your conviction, so that, and with the realization that the judge has read your letter, so you don't have to cover everything in the letter?
Yes, sir. When I was 16, I committed a horrible act. I acted out of a series of horrible decisions, and I regret that day always, and I will always regret that day. I was lucky enough and blessed by Matt Bevin to receive a pardon, which I neither asked for nor expected. We did ask for a commutation of sentence. And in the last year, I've come to realize, as I'm starting a new life as an adult for the first time, how many obstacles come before a person when they are a convicted felon. There are job opportunities that they will never be able to have. There are housing for some retirement communities, will not allow felons to live there. I plan on having children someday and pass on some of the values that my parents believed in. And I hope that I am able to participate in their lives as fully as possible. And I know as a convicted felon, there are some things that I will not be able to do in their lives. I'll not be able to coach sports teams. I will not be able to chaperone events at church and school sometimes. I will not be able to go certain places where they're allowed to go. And I just hope to have a full involvement in my children's lives in the future. And I hope that my history does not hurt them and their upbringing and their lives.
Do you realize that even with an expungement of all of the records connected to your offenses, that you will sometimes run into people who will know what happened and what you did and what you were convicted of?
Of course. I know when I go to try to buy my first home and I go to the bank to get a loan, that if I was expunged, I might have better options for interest and loans. And this is in a legal setting where they would do a background check. But as I meet people in the world, normal people don't do background checks. They Google people. And so I realized that everybody I meet has the ability on their phone in 5 seconds to find out my entire history, as the newspapers have put it, and so everybody that I come in contact with will have that ability to know my past.
Why do you think that you warrant an expungement? Why do you think you deserve an expungement?
I believe that an expungement will give me the opportunity to live a full and unhindered life. This has nothing to do with the guilt that I carry and that I feel every day. I know that I have done wrong in my life. I just hope to live the future in a better way that will make my parents and my family proud and give me every opportunity to succeed in the world.
Throughout the criminal process, you've pled guilty, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I pled guilty and I took a plea bargain August 3rd of 2003. I've never argued my guilt. And even with the commutation and pardon, I was 100% forward. And when I meet people like the job I have now at Prudential and the framing company, when I meet them, I feel like it is an obligation for me to tell a potential employer some of my history. And so I've been very open and honest with all the people that I work with and my boss. And I'm ashamed of my actions, but I am not ashamed of the history since then. I grew a lot in prison and I changed a lot. And I'm definitely a different man now than I was when I was 16.
Even though you pled to murder, was the action that you were involved in killing your parents, was that premeditated, planned at all?
No, it was a night that my father and I had been locked in the house for 5 days because it had snowed and I wasn't at school. He wasn't working at the time. And for 5 days, we just fought and argued all the time. And that night I was drinking and we'd been into it and it happened. I did not plan it. I did not, I didn't plan it. No, it happened.
And where did it happen in your home?
Downstairs in the living room.
Was that a basement or
Well, it was a 2-level house. And so the first floor is a walk-in, and then the second floor is a walk-out because it's built on a hill. And so it wasn't a basement, it was our living room. So all of the bedrooms were downstairs and the TV room was downstairs. You know, it wasn't exactly a basement. The back of the house was definitely ground level.
What room did it actually occur in, the killings?
The living room where the TV was, or TV.
Is there anything in particular that you would like to say to Judge Williams about this other than what you've testified to and written in your letter?
I know the term execution style has been thrown around, and I perceive that very differently than some people do. And I kind of cringe at that because I think that the normal person, when I first heard it, you have somebody under your control and you're dictating their actions. And it was nothing like that. It just happened. And there were no commands given. I did not control them in any way. I cringe at that because it makes me feel like people see me as some cold-blooded monster, and that's not who I am, and that's not who I want to be.
Oh, thank you. That's all the questions I have at this time.
Thank you.
Mr. Wright, would you like to inquire of the witness?
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Mr. Walker. You said you did not request the pardon, did you?
No, my family and I requested a commutation of sentence, which would simply reduce the sentence. And on his own, without being asked, Governor Bevin gave a full unconditional pardon.
And I noticed in some of the pleadings filed by your counsel that you indicated recently you got the opportunity to meet with Mr. Bevin and speak with him about the pardon he gave to you.
Yes, sir.
How did that meeting come about?
I stopped by his house and knocked on his door to thank him.
And is that close to where you are living now?
It's 5 or 6 miles away. It's in Louisville, yeah.
All right. The family members that you are living with now that are about 5 miles from Mr. Bevin's home, do they know him?
No, they have talked to him on the phone the night. A week before I received my pardon, Matt Bevin called them to discuss the letters that they had written for the commutation attempt. And so my aunt and uncle talked to him on the phone for about 30 minutes. And as far as I know, that's all the contact they've ever had with him.
And they live about 5 or 6 miles from him?
Yes, sir.
Did they also communicate with any other persons that might have been affiliated with Mr.
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this time.
Well, Mr. April, you brought out the fact that...
Wait just a second, Mr. Wright. Let him state his objection.
Yes.
There's no basis to attack the pardon here. There is no, I can state on the record that I checked with the family members after the pardon to find out whether anybody had even contributed anything to Matt Bevin, and was told that they hadn't. There is no basis for these questions because the pardon isn't an issue. The only thing that is an issue is whether the pardon would allow whether he can be expunged.
Okay, Mr. Wright, let's move on. I mean, I think you've inquired as to Mr. Walker's involvement in it, and I think that he doesn't seem to have any other information. So let's move on. Okay.
All right. Mr. Walker, you indicated that you want this expungement to be able to help you in children's lives and coaching in school. And I don't know if you mentioned church activities, but in things such as that. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So if you apply as a mentor through a school system, or as a coach, or as a youth group leader through the church, would you anticipate disclosing the fact that when you were younger, you killed both of your parents to the persons that would be making the decision to hire you or to place you in that position? Would you anticipate disclosing that to them if you're granted this expungement?
Objection, hypothetical question.
Well, you asked a hypothetical.
Overruled. Continue.
Go
All
ahead.
right. So I believe that when people meet me and they see who I am today, they will be able to look past my mistakes and my past actions. If an employer is looking at me and they do not know me, all they're looking at is a piece of paper, and they see this person is a convicted felon for 2 counts of murder, they are automatically going to throw me out. But if they look at this and they know me and they get to know me, I think people will be able to look past my actions in a much more total picture. So yes, I've been very open with my employers. My bosses, the whole company I work for now knows exactly what I've done. And if they ask questions, I'm more than happy to elaborate.
I guess I'm talking about in the future, if this expungement is granted and that piece of paper in there to show them when they run a background check what you did when you were younger, would you intend to voluntarily disclose that if the record had been expunged? If the record is expunged and sealed?
Ask and answer.
No, he didn't answer that question.
I don't think he was completely responsive. I think he was, be more directly responsive, Mr.
Okay.
Walker.
Yes, I've always been very open, and I will continue to be very open. I just think that if it is on the paper in black and white, I will automatically get denied. But if people, because there are certain restrictions for people, you're not allowed to do this if you've been convicted of these felonies, automatically I will be thrown out. But if I have an expungement and it is not technically on my record, even when they find out my history, when I share my history, they will be able to look at me as a person and not as a convicted felon and throw me out because of this.
And it would be your opinion then that they would be able in that situation to make a more informed decision?
Yes. They would be able. I'm sorry.
Do you think it would be important for them to make an informed decision about whether to place you in a position with children, or in a position where firearms were around, or a position of leadership? Don't you think it would be better for them to be able to make a fully informed decision?
I do think that they should make a fully informed decision, and they should get to know me as well as my past. If all they are looking at is my past, they do not have an informed decision. All they have is something black and white on paper, and they don't know me as a person. So this would give the chance to let them know me fully as a person and not just as a single act in my life.
You've talked about some situations you're in now, jobs that you're holding, places where you're working with dogs. Those folks have apparently been able to make a fully informed decision and place you in that position.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
they've had access to your record,
Yes, absolutely.
and nothing's been hidden from them.
No.
But
Not
you're
at all.
asking to hide this from folks in the future if the record is expunged or sealed. Wouldn't that be correct?
No, I'm not asking to hide anything. I carry it with me, and I talk about it all the time. My parents are always on my mind.
It would be hidden from those that might want to look at the background to see what went into this case if the record was sealed.
You cannot hide Google, and I would never hide my past or my parents. This is something that is part of my life.
Now, I want to talk because Judge Williams did not participate in the trial or plea of this matter, and I assume has not seen a PSI report or any report of the facts. You indicated in questioning by Mr. April that this is something that just happened. I don't know if you used the word spontaneous or if that's just in some of the material that he's filed, but you used the word that it just happened. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Tell Judge Williams what you shot your father with.
A 9mm semi-automatic rifle
And tell Judge Williams where on his body you shot your father.
in the back of the head.
And tell Judge Williams how long you looked at the back of your father's head through the scope before you pulled the trigger.
I'm not sure.
Do you recall telling a friend that you aimed the gun at your father's head for about 5 minutes, thinking about how easy it would be to kill him before you pulled the trigger?
I do not recall that conversation. I was pretty drunk that night, and the events afterwards, I was in an emotional disarray, and I'm not exactly sure what I said to, was it Johnny Hale or William Rowe?
Yes.
That night was kind of blurry afterwards.
Tell Judge Williams what you shot your mother with.
The same weapon.
All right. And didn't you stand over her and reload the weapon with a clip before you shot her?
No, it was one clip.
You recall after this happened, do you recall that someone speaking to police officers in the state of Oklahoma?
Yes, sir.
And you recall telling them that your mom couldn't go on living without your dad. She loved him too much. I put a clip in the gun and I shot her.
I did not recall that.
Tell Judge Williams how you ended up in Oklahoma after you killed both of your parents.
I took the family car and drove there.
Did you drive straight from here to Oklahoma?
No, I drove to Mexico.
And you crossed the border down in Laredo, Texas, over into Mexico, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what did you do with that 9mm rifle that you had killed your parents with?
I hid it behind a dumpster in Laredo.
Your Honor, may I object?
Sure.
I want to start off by saying, one, that Mr. Walker from the time has always admitted his guilt. He pled guilty. He took what turned out to be the maximum sentence for this offense because subsequent to his plea.
What's state your objection and then you can explain.
Oh, okay.
Me to know
My
what we're-
objection is the serious nature of the offense is already in the record, and it is not a basis for denying the expungement. So I don't understand.
So you're saying that a judge should not take into consideration the nature of the underlying crime or what should I take into consideration then?
Well, you should take it into
I
consideration.
know nothing about this, which is good for everybody, probably. You know?
No, I don't mind that he's getting some of the information out, but he's actually putting the defendant through an attempt to say that this crime is so significant that there is no way he should get an expungement.
That's exactly right. I agree. You're exactly right.
And it's particularly clear.
Is that an inappropriate argument, Mr. April?
Yes, because in the statute, there are 4 different ways in which you can get an expungement. 3 of them are limited to Class D felonies of a certain caliber or the equivalent of them. The only one that doesn't have a limitation on the nature of the felony is the one we're talking about here. When you
Or
look,
we wouldn't be here, right? Or we wouldn't be here if we were talking about Class C. Obviously, we're operating under that, so
but I'm saying that
go
the
ahead.
legislature did not say we can only give pardons to people who do Class D through B, but we can't give them for A or capital offenses. They made it clear that it doesn't matter what offense you committed, including capital murder, if you have a pardon. So I don't understand why.
We all agree with that. What should testimony be limited to in this case? Then you just wait, let me finish. You think testimony should only be limited to positive things or that have happened since this date for the last 16 years? What about someone that, and I'm not equating this together, but what about somebody that participated in 9/11 and they came before me for an expungement? I should know about what they'd done, what it involved. I mean, this gentleman has never denied what he's done. He's taken responsibility for what he's done. So
Well,
I don't. The thing I'm having, I don't know the parameters. That's the reason I didn't use the clear and convincing evidence of what, that he should or should not have an expungement. So I want to listen to everything here. I will assure you that nothing I hear here will shock you. At this point in my life and the kind of cases I've had, nothing's going to shock me. And I'll just have to make a decision within my sound discretion. If you think I've abused my discretion, one way or the other, either one of you can appeal it. So let's just proceed. I think I understand, Mr. Wright. If you bring testimony in about what happened in this case by these other officers, you can do that. But let's just proceed. And I understand. I think you've covered the crime of the father. I don't think you've gotten to the mother. Let's quickly talk about the mother if you want to, and if you don't, we can move on. Okay.
Okay, Judge, I'll do that. I had just a couple more questions I want to cover with Mr. Walker. One, do you know how many times you shot your mother?
I do not. I had one clip, and after I shot my father, she was in the room with him, and she jumped up, she started screaming, and I emptied the clip. I'm not sure how many times I shot her.
Now, after you shot them, I know that you've testified and you've told Judge Williams about going down to Laredo, Texas, and over into Mexico, and back up to Oklahoma. But before you took off in the family car to head out of state and out of country, where did you go before you did that after you shot both of your parents?
Well, I had a good friend, Johnny Hale, and he was working at Sonic, and I was in a panic. And anytime I needed advice, because he was a year older and he was going through stuff himself in his life, I would go to him for advice, and I was scared. I didn't know what to do. So I went to him and I told him, and he didn't believe me at first. And he said, well, we should go get William Runner, because he carried himself as somebody that was very knowledgeable in the world. And so they said, we don't believe you. We would like to help, but we don't believe you. And we want to see proof. And so we went back to my house, and they saw my parents, and they said, here, take the money in our wallets, take what we got. You need to go and run to Mexico and live a life. And so that's what I did. I took advice from two of my friends who were older. It was bad advice, but I was in such a state of panic, I really didn't know what to do.
You brought them over to show them your parents' bodies that you had killed.
Yes, sir.
Now, the only other thing I want to ask is, I know there's been a lot of talk about accomplishments that you've made after the fact, rehabilitation. You've been, you've had athletic awards, acting positions in prison, correct?
Yes, sir.
But prior to this murder, you had you were accomplished even before you killed your parents, correct? You were in the Scouts.
Yeah.
You were in the Scouts.
Yes, sir. I was in the Boy Scouts.
You attained the rank of Eagle Scout. Just about.
Life.
Excuse me.
I was a Life Scout. I never attained Eagle.
And you attained that just a few months before this happened.
Yes, sir.
Judge, that's the questions I have at this time for Mr. Walker.
You have any redirect, Mr. April?
Yes, Mr. Walker, did I understand you correctly that you are saying that you want the expungement so that you can get through the door in any of these situations you talked about before?
Yes, sir. I believe.
Is that right?
I believe that this on my record will stop me from getting a lot of jobs. So it will stop me at the door. But once I get in the door with an application and I am freely able to speak to somebody and talk to somebody, then yes, I am more than willing to share my history, and I would never hide it if anybody ever talked about it. And I will even bring it up to people sometimes that I do not need to, because I feel like this is a part of me, and I will continue to carry my parents' legacy with me, and everything I do from this day forward reflects upon their legacy as much as mine.
So you believe that, is it correct that you believe that if someone sees this record, whether it's somebody who's where you're applying for a coaching job, whether it's trying to get a loan, anything like that, you will not get that opportunity for a face-to-face discussion with a potential employer, a potential bank person, etc.
Yes, sir. I do believe that. I do believe that. And as Mr. Wright said, they will not have a full picture of me if all they see is that on a piece of paper.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Before you call your next witness, I want to ask y'all to do this in case I forget it. Listen, okay, you want to call your first witness?
I'll call Ricky Underwood, Judge.
Officer Underwood, are you still on here with us?
Yes.
There you are. Okay. You raise your right hand. Testimony about to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Officer Underwood, for the record, would you state your name?
Ricky Underwood.
And Officer Underwood, how is it that you are employed at this time? What do you do?
I'm work at the school as a school resource officer for Taylor County School Police Department.
All right. You have spent a total of how many years in law enforcement?
Over 35.
And with regard to your time with the Kentucky State Police, could you tell the court when you started with the state police and the positions or ranks that you held until your retirement?
I started with the Kentucky State Police in July of 1989, and I've held the position of trooper first class, detective. I was a detective for 10 years at the Columbia Post, and then went to special operations as a canine handler and retired from there.
You have, since your retirement, worked with the Taylor County Sheriff's Department and now with the Taylor County Police Department in the school system. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Were you the detective assigned as the lead investigator into the deaths of Brian Walker and Barbara Peterson?
I was.
And for the record, I'm going to ask to give some background so this court is familiar with that. Can you tell the court the date and approximate time when you were notified, and in relation to that, the date and approximate time when these crimes occurred?
The date that I was notified was on 12/9 of 2002 at approximately 1100 hours.
And can you tell the court in Adair County, where did you go to observe the crime scene in this case?
It's approximately 17 miles from the courthouse in Columbia. It's in the area of a Nifley community. It's 17 miles from the courthouse to that residence.
Is this, would it be considered a rural part of the county?
Yes, yes. It's a small community of the eastern part of the county.
Would you tell the court, and I'm just going to ask you now to tell the court a little bit about the crime scene, your investigation, and ultimately what you determined had happened in this case?
Well, basically, when we arrived on the scene, we were notified that there had two witnesses at the post area, giving them information that this crime had been committed, and we were en route with troopers and also first responders, ambulance, because we didn't know what we had. We arrived on the scene to find a two-story house, and then once we made entry into the house, we found that it contained two victims both had been shot, lying in the lower part of the lower section of the house, which is looked like to be the living area.
Did you were on the this proceeding when Mr. Walker testified earlier in response to my questions as to how the two individuals were shot, the two victims were killed, based on your other officers' interviews with the two witnesses, Mr. Hale and Mr. Runner, as well as officers in Oklahoma that spoke with Mr. Walker. Was that your understanding of these crimes, how they were committed?
He gave a pretty good description of actually how the evidence stated, or how the evidence was shown at the crime scene. Also, the witnesses had described. The male victim had been shot from a distance, and one shell casing was recovered in what was described as Blake's room, from where he shot the first shot. And he was shot in the back of the head, and then was lying face up on a chair when the chair fell backwards in the floor. The female victim was on the couch, hunkered down, face down on the couch, and looked like she had been shot several times. And later we determined that she had been shot 7 times. Three in the face and 4 rest in the torso, upper torso, with the same weapon.
Okay, I may have interrupted you, but 3 shots to the face and 4 to the upper torso?
Yes, correct.
Was the 9mm rifle that was used in this case, was it ever recovered?
No, it was not. The only thing was recovered was shell casings and lead from the scene.
Were those items consistent with the crime having been committed and the murders having been committed by a 9mm rifle?
Yes.
Do you know the approximate distance from Mr. Walker's father, where Brian Walker was killed, from where Blake was at when he fired the shot? How far away was he? You say he's in his bedroom and he was in the outer room that the victim was. What was the distance?
It was approximately 10 feet.
And
from where he was sitting to where the victim was.
As far as the range or the distance from his mother that he was when he shot and killed her, shot her the 7 times and killed her, what distance were those shots fired from based on your investigation?
They was determined to be at close range. From close, I mean from anywhere from 4 feet in to close contact.
Did Mr. Walker testified, and did your investigation confirm that he did travel from Adair County south to the Texas-Mexico border into the area of Laredo, Texas?
That's correct. We also had tracking on the credit cards that we had determined that were missing from the scene. And we had verifications on places where he was trying to attempt to use the credit cards, and had notified the authorities that he was attempting to cross the border. And was, by his own testimony, that he did go across to Mexico and back.
And then how was it that he came to be apprehended, if you recall, in Oklahoma?
From my understanding, I spoke with investigators out there, and they just got a call about a person sleeping in the vehicle. And when they approached him and woke him up and then got him out, he gave them a false name to start with, but then he tried to run and was apprehended. Once he was apprehended, they ran the vehicle, checked it. It came back as having a hit on it. And then he told them who he was, really, his real name.
Do you know how many days after December the 9th, when you went out there at 11 o'clock in the morning, how many days later before he was apprehended in Oklahoma?
Not real sure without looking at the case report. Several days.
According to the Oklahoma report that I have, it shows
Asked and answered. This is Mr. Wright testifying. I'm sorry. He said he didn't know, and now we're asking Mr. Wright to tell us the answer. I'm objecting.
Judge, you're muted.
I was agreeing with you, Mr. April. I didn't know you couldn't hear me. I just told Mr. Wright to move on, but I was muted.
I couldn't.
So I understand that he was gone for several days, and that the officer doesn't remember with any particularity without looking at the file. He can refresh his memory if you like from the file, but I would suggest we move on. I get the point.
All right, Judge. Officer Underwood, you spent about 35 years in law enforcement, and what would be your opinion about whether this expungement motion should be granted as the investigating officer in this case?
Well, my opinion is I don't think, by the short period of time that he served, that he would really deserve expungement, especially a crime, with two people being, their lives being taken the way they were.
Judge, that's the questions then that I have for Detective Underwood. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. April, you may inquire.
Mr. Underwood, did you stay on the case through the trial?
Through the trial?
Mm-hmm. Well, the guilty plea.
I was signed to the case, yes, but I didn't come to the hearings, no.
You didn't. Well, did you talk with Mr. Wright about the decision on how to settle the case? Did he ask for your input?
Yes.
And you, at the time, understood that Mr. Wright had at least stated that he was going to seek the death penalty?
Yes.
And did Mr. Wright ask you for your opinion on the settlement?
Yes.
And did you agree with the prosecution's offer of life without parole for 25 years?
I did.
So despite what you think about this crime, you didn't think it deserved the death penalty. You didn't think it deserved life without parole. Is that right?
I did life without parole, yes.
No, the offer was life without parole eligibility for 25 years. That was the offer. And that's what
Okay.
Mr. Walker took. Now, did you agree with that?
Yes,
All right. So you understand that Blake Walker served before the governor commuted his sentence over 16 years of the 25. So he was 16 and a half. He was like I'm sorry, it's even longer than that. He was like 7 or 8 years away from being eligible for parole. Did you understand that?
yes.
So how many cases have you been involved in where the death penalty was sought?
Over my career, several.
And were there cases where the death penalty, that you worked where the death penalty was imposed? Where they actually got the death penalty?
No, I don't think so.
And in those cases, were you satisfied with that, how they were settled?
Yes, I've never had one that's been early released. Most of them serve their time.
What do you mean by early release? Paroled?
Paroled early, yes.
No.
No, I'm not.
There is
I
a
mean,
early parole. This was not a parole.
right.
This was the commutation by the governor to the time already served.
Yes.
Okay. So are you saying that none of the cases you've had have ever, those people have ever been paroled?
I'm sure there's some of us been paroled, but not been, released early by the governor, been pardoned by the governor.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm saying.
That wasn't my question, but I think we're okay. All right. I have no further questions.
Do you have any redirect, Mr. Wright?
I don't, Judge. Thank you.
Well, Trooper Officer Underwood, it's good to see you again. It's been many years and be excused.
Thanks.
Yeah. Now you have next witness,
Judge, I will briefly call Detective Wales.
Detective Wells. Will you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
You may proceed.
Detective Wales, you are presently employed with the sheriff's office there in Cumberland County. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And how many years did you spend with the Kentucky State Police prior to your retirement?
28.
And what positions did you hold with the state police during that 28 years?
Trooper, 14 years. 14 years as detective in general investigation.
And did you assist Detective Underwood with the investigation into this case that you've heard testimony about today?
Yes.
Would you tell the court what role you had in the investigation of this case?
I was on post. 2 juveniles and their parents came to post. I got the information from, of course, to talk to them from the dispatcher. Originally, it was about 11 o'clock on December the 6th or 9th, 2002. They were very excited. Told of the murder that had taken place there in Dare County. As soon as I got directions and to the place, I got another trooper with BJ Burton to take tape statements from them in detail, and we proceeded to the scene. When I got to the scene, I was there to support. Ricky was going to be the case officer, which was decided by supervisor. I collected evidence, did a video of the scene, had another trooper with me, taking photographs, collecting evidence. I think there was several guns collected from the residents that night, several items. I think Ricky collected a couple of items. I listed all of those on what is known as a evidence recovery sheet, KSP 41. All of that was logged in at post. Other than the original information, that was about the gist of what I did. I collected some earplugs and a note that's left, I seem to be by the perpetrator.
Mr. Walker had left that note behind.
It's a very short note.
Were you the first detective on scene?
I think so. There were some troopers there with me. I think there was 4 of us, there was 3 troopers, and of course one of them was with me. But I think I was one of the first that was there.
One of those troopers, I believe, was Trooper Gibbs,
Yes.
who is deceased now.
Yes.
Detective Wells, you followed this case, I think, at least to some degree through the investigation over those next few days, and then later the prosecution. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you, as one of the investigating officers in this case, what is your opinion about Mr. Walker's request to have the record of this file, or the record of this case expunged?
I see why he wants it expunged, but I don't agree with it.
And why is that? Why is that?
Well, he's talking about employment. There's so many other things that it will be hidden from that need to be up front, such as, if his employment was going to involve in the school system. That record is that is a very important thing to know, to be on record, not to be taken lightly.
In your career, 28 years, did you ever investigate a more serious crime than a murder?
No.
Judge, that's the questions I have for Detective Wells. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. April, would you like to inquire of the detective?
Yes. Mr. Daniels, are you,
It's Wells.
Wells.
sorry, it shows Daniels.
That's being shot from the sheriff's office. That's Scott Daniels is the sheriff's
That's
office.
what I wrote down first, and then I corrected it when I saw that.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Wells. So let me ask you this. Are you in favor of expungements at all?
It would, for me, some could be possible if it's a small amount of crime. But any large scale crime, I would be against it.
So you disagree with the legislation, the statute that allows expungement for any crime for which there was a pardon. You disagree with that?
Yes.
So you think the legislature was wrong to do that?
Doesn't matter what I think, but
Well, that's what you were presented for, sir, to tell us what you think. Let me ask you this. Are you familiar with the expungement statute at all? You know anything about it?
somewhat.
Do you understand that if it's expunged, there will be no record of this?
Correct. It will show that it has been expunged. Is that correct?
And there would, yes, would there be any record left after expungement? Do you know?
No, it just shows an expungement. Is that correct?
Well, I'm asking you, is there any place that the official record will exist of this conviction and the records related to it?
I don't know.
You don't know. Well, the statute specifically says if Judge Williams goes ahead and grants expungement, the order will not preclude the prosecutor's office from retaining a non-public record for law enforcement purposes. So Mr. Wright will be able, if he wants it, to retain all the records of this for law enforcement purposes. Did you know that when you made your statement?
No.
No, okay. Does it make any difference to you as a detective based on your experience and your expertise, which I acknowledge, that this crime was committed by a 16-year-old?
Does it do what?
That the crime here, Mr. Walker committed, was committed when he was 16 years old?
I'm aware of it.
I said, does it make any difference to you?
No.
No. You would treat it the same as if the person who committed the crime was 35?
Yes.
Okay. So is it your opinion that every employer, every school should be able to have access to everyone's criminal history?
Yes,
And you would think that would be true even for Class D felonies that have been expunged?
yes.
That should have been, that could be expunged? So
yes.
you're really against expungement altogether? I have no further questions.
Right, do you have any inquiry?
No, Judge, I appreciate these officers for appearing relatively short notice, but no further questions, Judge.
Okay, you both may be excused, or you're welcome to stay online. Do you have any other witnesses?
I do not, Judge.
The idea that we are even having this hearing, that we are watching this, to me is absolute madness. All right, let's take a step back and remember that he pled guilty to life without the possibility of parole until after serving 25 years. He could have gotten the death penalty, but he took that plea deal. After serving just 17 years, the governor pardoned him. Now, this governor has a notorious record for making absolute maddening pardons. Maybe you're familiar with with who he is. Blake Walker, right? Was just one of his pardons. So he had pardoned, the governor had pardoned 428 pardon commutations. Some of the governor pardons include sexual assaultists, murderers, drug offenders, but one in particular, which we're going to cover here, caused outrage, and that was the pardon of 41-year-old Mika Cholet, who was convicted just last year of sexual assaulting a 9-year-old child. He was sentenced to serve 23 years, and he served just 1 year. Yes, this is our wonderful governor. So you can't make it up, and we'll cover this. And again, I want to thank you, Miss Rose, for bringing this case, and Richard for providing the research. Now, there are a few things that really stick out to me about this. Now, remember, he's already been pardoned. He's free. He has no restrictions. There's no parole officers he has to report to. There's no curfew. There's no testing. There's nothing. He's free. But he wants one more bite at the apple because this isn't enough for him. No, he wants his record expunged. So he wants it to be as if this has never existed. And then the reasons that he gives for it, these are the reasons. One day, when he has his theoretical children, and these theoretical children grow up and go to school, and they become theoretical athletes, he wants to be able to coach them. Reason 2, he wants to be able to chaperone them and other children. Number 3, when he theoretically retires, he wants to be able to have access to all retirement communities, including the few retirement communities that don't allow felons to live there. And I guess you have the 4th, which is one day when he wants to buy his theoretical house, he wants to have a slightly lower interest rate. So for those reasons, he should have his record expunged. Are you kidding me? Are you really going to tell me that you're going to put all these people in the room to support him, that you're going to go and take taxpayer dollars so that we can sit here and lobby that he should have his record expunged so that he can coach and chaperone other children? You don't think as a parent I would have the right, I would need to have the right to know if there is a man who killed both his parents coaching my children? I shouldn't have that right. My right shouldn't come before his. You can't make it up. Make it make sense because it simply does not. What assurances do we have that he won't snap again and do something to our children, to someone who he just doesn't like? There's obviously something wrong with him. This isn't a normal, healthy kid. There's something broken in him. And you want to go mess around with the system and say, you know what, get out a bunch of years early? Whatever, fine. But now you want to make it so that he's going to be involved in the daily lives of our children? You want to make it so that an employer won't know what he's done so he can get a job doing literally anything without an employer knowing anything about what he's done? Why? And then your answer and your defense is, well, there's Google. And besides, once they get to know me, I'm such a good guy, they'll hire me. Once they get to know me, the problem is that once they Google and they see that I killed my mother and my father, well, then they won't even want to meet with me. But once they meet me, I'll win them over. Can you get any more sociopathic? It's like we live in a paradox world where monsters get more rights than all of us who just want to be able to send our kids to school and feel that they are safe. How does this keep them safer than they are now? Now you might be asking, well, was it granted? And I don't know. We looked, Richard looked, I looked, you can look. It's a black hole. There's nothing. And that almost makes me wonder, was he granted? Is that part of the expungement? Is it kept anonymous? Does the sealing of the truth start now? And I think that we would say, maybe it does. I don't know. Certain things that really stuck out about the way that he answered questions was alarming, in my opinion. When asked the certain simple questions, do you know how many times you shot your mother? No, everything was blurry. I have no recollection. But then when he asks, well, did you reload the clip of your gun? Nope, it's one clip. Is it not obvious to anyone with critical thinking skills that he's selective memory? As if he wouldn't know all these years later what they wrote about how many times he shot her. He wouldn't have known about the autopsy report. You're telling me you're to quote him, I would never hide my past or my parents. They're always a part of me. You wouldn't know how many bullets you fired into your mother. She's always a part of you. How would you not know that? Because you're lying. At your own hearing, you're lying. Then he goes on to say, to blame it on his two friends. Because he took his friends to show off his handiwork. But no, he words it that they needed to see proof. They needed to see proof. So I took them there. And then they gave me advice that I shouldn't have taken. It was their fault. He was a whole year older than me. He was so worldly. It was their fault that I ran. Remember, he's already been granted a commutation. He's already been let out of prison. He's already been given that pardon. Now he wants an expungement. For those of you who watched enough Louisiana parole hearings, he probably would have been denied a commutation of his hearing with those answers. You don't know. It depends, but he talks about the act he committed as if it was like he ran a stop sign or something. I didn't feel any sense of like remorse, any sense of terror, of nothing. It's just like, there's a lot of information that Richard provided, but really I'm just going to bring it down to this one here from 2019. Blake Walker, among hundreds pardoned by Bevin. In the last days of his term, the governor exercised his right to pardon several individuals who were convicted of crimes. Among those he selected was Blake Walker. Walker was convicted in 2003 of 2 counts of murder. He pled guilty to the murder of his parents. In 2002, Walker shot his father once in the head with a rifle and then shot his mother multiple times. At his sentencing hearing, Walker wanted to explain why he killed his parents. He stated, "My father would yell, scream, and curse at me for the least little thing. The emotional roller coaster with my father never slowed down or ended." This is what he said to the judge at his sentencing hearing. As for his mother, he could not explain why he did it. She was the most loving, kind person I've ever known, and I don't know why she had to be involved. You hear these words even? Why she had to be involved. Involved. Like it was, first like it was even his father's fault that he killed him, right? Walker was sentenced to life in prison. Money, the parents gave him everything. He's a Boy Scout. He's he has an older brother that was completely, doing great, not involved in this, not running around killing people. Walker was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after 25. He was 16 at the time of the murders, although he quickly turned 17, I think a few days later. Commonwealth attorney Brian Wright, who was prosecuted the Walker case, took issue with the pardon. In an NPR interview, he stated, "It was a disturbing case for the community, for that family, and as it stands now, one man made the decision that is what ought to be done. Now Blake Walker is a free man with no supervision, no conditions attached to his release, and granted a full pardon." The pardon Walker was just one of 428 pardons, and the commutation Bevin signed. Some of those the former governor pardoned included, as we went on and talked about all these horrible monsters, including the man who sexually assaulted a 9-year-old child, who was sentenced to 23 years but only served 1. And we're going to cover that case here in the next, soon. So make sure you subscribe if you want to get the notification, turn on the bell if you want to get notified about when that goes up. And the governor just talks about why he did it. And really, come on, let's be real. This governor just signed basically everything that he could get his hands on. 428 pardons. I don't know. I should really look it up, but that sounds like pretty much a record to me. So yeah, here it is, as you've seen it. Someone who took the life of his parents seemed to show, in my opinion, zero accountability, remorse, empathy, any kind of signs of human life. He's kind of like a lizard humanoid is what he really left me with the impression of. Might, for all we know, actually have his record expunged. And I don't know. He was saying something like people can Google it and there's always Google. And what's the next thing that someone does when their record is expunged? I would guess that they would change their name legally. I wonder, maybe there could be a condition in there that would allow a judge overseeing a name change that such a crime existed. And maybe that judge would have some more common sense and not allow it. But that would be the next step. And then, no one at that hearing seemed to actually understand Google that much, but there are ways to not make something like this disappear from Google, but there are ways to make it harder to find. And there are companies prominent companies, big companies that make a lot of money that you can go look up and pay to hide things about yourselves. It's not that much money either. What they do is they would just make a lot of positive articles about you. It could be anything. It could be how you're such a great chaperone or a coach, or you volunteered at a cookie shop. And you get enough of those articles and you push them up to the top of Google. And now killing your parents is all of a sudden on page 8. And anything not on page 1, in my opinion, is pretty much invisible. Page 8, forget about it. So yeah, there are plenty of things that one can do to make it so that a Google search does not reveal your past. What we heard on this hearing was really a mockery of our rights as parents, of our rights as citizens who have not committed these types of crimes, to have the right to know who's going to be coaching or chaperoning or who we are hiring. That is where the mockery is. And with that, I'll let you go.